Uproot the Mineral Resources and Energy Department. This is the call from protesters who were outside Parliament in Cape Town today. They claim the department is not making environmentally sound choices. Organisers of the protest say political leaders are apathetic in dealing with the climate and ecological crisis. Protesters are threatening legal action against government if it pursues more coal-fired power stations. Today's action follows the National Energy Regulator's decision this week to approve generation licenses for Car Powership SA. The approval was given despite Car Powership SA failing to secure the necessary environmental clearance in June. African Climate Alliance's Gabriel Klaasen was part of the protest in Cape Town today. He joins us now here on South Africa Tonight. Gabriel, good evening. First up, a general question. How was the march?
The march was amazing, in my opinion. I think we had a great turnout. Ordinarily, we would expect way more, but due to COVID and the fact that it's also Heritage Day, we didn't anticipate this many people. But luckily, we had a great turnout. Many different demonstrations and pieces of artivism, which is art and activism. Yeah, it turned out quite nicely, as well as people keeping their social distance because of COVID. It was amazing.
I understand this march today was part of a global protest action that began a couple of days ago, to which the likes of your organization, African Climate Alliance, have supported.
Yes, so this action was actually tied to two different actions. It goes under the banner of Uproot the DMRE, which is Uproot the Department of Minerals, Resources and Energy, as well as Uproot the System, which ties into the broader international Fridays for Future global climate action. And it really ties to the messaging of us wanting a just energy future, as well as for the end of system corruption, to stop affecting people who are already suffering so much underneath the corruption and injustice that we face on a day-to-day basis.
In seeking climate action and environmental justice, as you are saying, why do you believe, or why do you say, rather, that the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is not making sound choices?
So one thing I've realized quite quickly about this action, especially during my own research and the research that was provided to us by science, is that we know that the future is in renewables and alternatives. We know that the future is not this investment in fossil fuels, not this investment in coal or gas, as you mentioned earlier. And the Department of Minerals, Resources and Energy, the DMRE, they are the biggest obstacle in our way to this socially owned renewable future, one that has a plethora of jobs and a new society that will actually benefit people who are suffering today. There's no future in fossil fuels. But despite that, they continue this investment and continue the narrative of profit over people, despite what the science and the facts of reality are showing them. That's why we're calling for their uprootment.
Have you engaged with the department to put your views across?
Yes, so in fact, what's happened recently is on the 22nd of September, national-wide across the country, we had a few demonstrations in different aspects, in different areas in front of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy's offices in the different provinces, which was quite powerful, I think, because it was a cross-intersecting of civil society. We had unions together alongside communities, alongside youth, which is oftentimes not seen or painted to be not seen by many officials. And we really put forward a demand, or lists of demands, and a memorandum, in fact, of demands calling for radical change, because we understand that we can't continue with this life. As well as today, when we engage with a few of our own representatives of the government, and we handed them our memorandums, despite a few of them getting quite riled up and actually accusing the crowd of not including workers, which is quite a strange thing because it is a national holiday. And so why would you assume that people who work day to day and tooth and nail would want to kind of come forward and give up their one day that they can actually kind of spend time with family? But at the same time, we stood with them, and with their voices signed to the papers, they stood with us just as equally the day before.
Okay. Among your key demands, I understand you want some practical parliamentary involvement or parliamentary oversight on the issue of climate change in South Africa. What are your other demands?
Definitely. So what we put forward today was we called for the urgent establishment of parliamentary kind of a joint standing committee on climate and ecological crisis, because even though we've got the presidential climate change committee, if President Cyril Ramaphosa were to leave, that committee might weigh in the balance. But this parliamentary joint standing committee would be a lot more, standard and targeted, as well as a more compatible NDC, which is our nationally determined contributions that would be brought forward to COP26 at the end of this year, or in the next month rather. We were really calling for the elimination of fossil fuel energy production by the year of 2035 at the latest. We would hope for sooner, but we know our government, as well as for the Department of Basic Education to adjust our curriculum to incorporate more climate education, because it's important that we ensure that young people understand not only what they're living through, but how to adapt to it as we move forward, as well as the adoption of a climate justice charter and many others.
Okay, 2035, that's how many years from now? 14 years. Is that reasonable time to expect a switch from fossil generated energy supply to renewables?
So what we've seen is that the IPCC report, which is a report that many people have, in the past few months, felt quite stressed about, because the messaging around it was basically, we are over, the world is basically over, which is quite alarming, but it's quite true in a sense as well, but we can still change it. 2035 is actually the latest that we could, we're being quite generous by putting that forward as a demand, because we know that government can start enacting that change today if they invest in renewables and alternatives. But their continued investment, as we see with, the car powership deal, this 20-year relationship that is completely toxic and provides very little to no jobs to people who are in desperate need of jobs, as well as many other aspects. We see that renewables are the future. We know that alternatives are the future. And so it is very realistic. It's just whether or not our government is willing to listen or not.
Okay, if they don't listen, what are your next steps? What are your next action? What's in the action plan for African Climate Alliance and your peers?
Definitely. So what we're looking at is, because we have called for the end of coal power, one thing that we've been looking at, and one thing that we've done is that in a line with the Uproot the RE campaign, as well as the Uproot the System campaign, African Climate Alliance, together with Groundwork and Vukani Environmental Movement, is directly challenging the Minister of the Department, Gabriel, as well as NERSA, decision to procure 1,500 megawatts of new coal power for new coal-powered capacity. We've handed on the 17th of September, we've handed a letter of demand to both of those institutions to ensure that we let them know that if they do not push aside this idea of procuring more coal power plants or more coal powered energy, we will be taking them to court under the banner of Cancel Coal, and with our attorneys at Center for Environmental Rights.
Okay,
we are taking this seriously because our livelihood is serious.
So legal action is looming unless government moves in the direction that which you are suggesting.
Yes, we know that we need it, because if we don't, I think one thing we've realized is that government will do something until they are questioned and called to the table to discuss. And oftentimes when they call to the table to discuss, it's often tokenistic. They look at community members and they ignore their voices. So this is basically us saying, as the community in the frontline communities, as young people, as civil society, we are taking you forward, and we are calling your bluff. We are calling for a future that is defined by zero coal or zero new procurement of coal, as well as a future defined with renewables and alternatives.
Thank you very much. That's African Climate Alliance's Gabriel Klaasen there talking to us about what happened outside Parliament in Cape Town today, as his organisation and others have begun this campaign of seeking climate action and environmental justice.